The warehouse doors slammed shut behind him. Somewhere in the cavernous back, a forklift screamed to life. Mark chewed on a toothpick, eyes narrowing as he studied the newcomer. The screaming calls to Jackson, age 43. Mark sneered. "Old man," he muttered under his breath, voice dripping with quiet challenge. With a flick of his wrist, he lobbed a mop at Jackson's feet. "This place is filthy. Clean it before lunch. Or don't bother coming back." Jackson bent, picked up the mop slowly. His gaze stayed fixed on some distant point. No eye contact, just a tired nod that hinted at a lifetime of tough mornings. Mark snorted, amusement rattling off his tongue. "Hey fellas, we got ourselves a grandpa intern." A few chuckles scattered around. Some glanced away awkwardly. Others smiled uneasily, but none stepped in. Across the room, Linda pressed her back into the cold metal shelf, jaw clenched. She said nothing. Jackson dipped the mop into a bucket of icy, murky water that reeked of old grease and bleach. His hands moved with slow precision, deliberate, unhurried. He leaned into the rhythm of the scrape and swirl, as though the stain on the floor were a stubborn puzzle begging for respect, not disdain. Mark swaggered closer, leaning against a steel rack. "Don't think, don't talk, just work." His voice bounced off concrete walls. Jackson didn't respond, just kept sweeping, ghosting the stain like he'd faced bigger challenges before. The stain wouldn't budge. The floor stayed dull and grim. Every swipe echoed with the weight of unspoken pasts. 2 workers peeked from behind the break room door. One whispered, "That guy's done in a week." The other shrugged, as if betting on the same outcome. Nothing distracted Jackson. Not the skeptical stares, not the echoing machine hum, not even the thick air of impatience buzzing around him. Mark idled by again, boot swinging a bucket. Water spilled across Jackson's shoes. "Oops," Mark grinned. "Should have moved faster." Still no reaction. Jackson quietly lifted the bucket and set it aside before returning to the same streak of grime. In the far corner, Linda wiped down a rusty table. This time, her eyes lingered on Jackson. She watched the unhurried precision. No panic, no flinch. Just quiet determination threading through each pass. Mark passed again, louder. Most guys bail after 2 days, especially old ones. He locked his gaze, searching for some spark. Jackson stayed rooted to his mop and the stain in front of him, determination etched into his hunched shoulders. One line, one circle, one repetition, each movement a small testament that he wasn't here to quit. In his back pocket, a faded notebook peeked out, edges dog-eared. He paused the mop, extracted it, jotted a quick note, then tucked it away, silence sealing his purpose. Linda saw. So did one of the forklift operators, but no one dared break the quiet. From behind a stack of crates, a voice muttered, "Who the hell takes notes while mopping?" Jackson made no reply. The hush stretched, longer than comfortable. Jackson didn't look up. He didn't break his rhythm. Mark stood near the coffee station, chest puffed with power. "New guys? A mute or what?" he barked. A few hollow laughs. Mark turned to the cluster of workers. "I run this floor. Managers don't come down here. They're too scared to sweat." He sipped his coffee slowly, theatrically, then tossed the cup onto the concrete. Jackson stepped over, picked it up, placed it neatly in the trash. Without a single word. Mark shook his head, pleased. "That's the right attitude. Quiet, obedient." Linda's jaw clenched. She wiped the same table again, cleaner this time, her swipe more precise, loaded with thoughtful tension. A co-worker whispered, "Better stay on Mark's good side." Another worker nodded and didn't even try to meet her eyes. Mark's was the law for now. Nobody pushed back. Jackson rolled his mop bucket silently out of earshot. 2 workers passed by him. One nodded and kept walking. The other stared straight ahead. No hellos. No offers to help. Just the droning hum of work. From the loading dock, Mark's voice echoed. "Break early, I dock your time." A burst of laughter followed, but it sounded forced, like a poorly timed laugh track. Jackson glanced toward the noise, then looked back to the floor. His shoulders dropped just a shade lower, almost invisible. Above him, a security camera blinked red, always watching. In the break room, Linda pressed her fingers into the sink's edge so tightly her knuckles went white. Quiet control. Not fear. Something deeper. Controlled calm. Jackson sat alone during lunch, perched on an upside-down crate, no tray, no chatter. Just a bottle of water. Across the room, others huddled in safe little circles. Quiet laughter, careful glances away. Linda leaned against the fridge, her arms folded thoughtfully. Something in Jackson's stillness pricked at her memory, like she'd seen that bearing before. Then Mark burst in, slumping into a chair, his tone boisterous. He recounted how he'd fired someone last year, the story landing with thuds, not laughs. The table held silence, a few forced nods. Jackson reached into his pocket again, pulled out the notebook, scribbled, closed it quietly. Linda glanced at him, her expression shifting into something like curiosity. Recognition. It wasn't clarity yet, but it was forming. Break ended with Mark's sharp clap. "Time's not free," he barked orders as Jackson rose, mop in hand. Head down, he trudged toward the same corner. Jackson worried the moment wouldn't pass too quickly. As the head of the stream cleared, the others, Jackson and Mark's voice cut through again. "Hold up." He called Jackson over. "You taking notes on how to clean?" Jackson met his eyes, briefly, then looked away. "Just learning," he said softly, and returned to work. Mark snorted dismissively. "No need, just follow orders." He pointed at the stain. "Better be gone before my next round." Jackson nodded once. He didn't hurry. Instead, he moved with quiet rhythm, a slow meditation in motion, as if the silence meant more than the words. Linda lowered her coffee. Her gaze followed him, longer this time, an unspoken question flickering. Her voice, when it came, was soft. "You ever seen someone that calm on day one?" Caleb shrugged. "Nope. He's either clueless or he owns the place." She didn't smile, not even a flicker. At the back door, Mark stood with his arms folded, watching Jackson as he mopped in silence. The tension between them hummed like a taut wire. Then Mark barked, "New task." Jackson looked up, eyes clear but unreadable. Mark jabbed a finger toward 3 bulky boxes stacked near the stairs. "Take those up to the mezzanine, now." There was no room for negotiation in his tone, no allowance for fatigue. Jackson didn't hesitate. He walked over, bent his knees, and lifted the first box. It was heavy, its corners worn, contents shifting, but he showed no sign of strain. Mark muttered just loud enough for the room to hear, "Should have hired someone younger." No one laughed. The weight of his words fell flat. The room had begun to change. Linda's eyes followed Jackson up each step. His back stayed straight, his breath deep but even. He moved with a kind of quiet dignity, like every step had a reason, not a single falter. Mark scoffed from below. "Let's see how long he keeps that act up." But Linda wasn't watching Jackson anymore. Her gaze had turned, locked on to Mark. At the top of the stairs, Jackson gently lowered the box without a sound. Mark watched, still grinning. "2 more to go, champ," he said, then turned his back. Jackson descended, slower now. His legs absorbed each step like they remembered old injuries that never quite healed. He lifted the second box. Caleb leaned in toward Linda. Why isn't he pushing back? She didn't answer. Her focus was fixed, sharpened. Jackson passed them, sweat tracing the back of his neck, hands wrapped tightly around the cardboard. He never asked for help, never looked for sympathy. On the mezzanine he paused, not to rest, but to pull out that now familiar notebook, scribbled something, tucked it back. Linda stepped forward instinctively, one footfall, then stopped herself. She didn't know why, not yet. Jackson wiped his brow, turned back for the third box. This one was heavier, more awkward. Caleb glanced at it, then away, choosing to stay silent. Linda didn't look away this time. She watched. Jackson's grip tightened. His breath drew longer. Step by step, he climbed. Near the top, his foot slipped. Just a moment, but the box shifted dangerously. He caught it. Barely. The same Mark saw it all. Didn't move. Just smiled and muttered, "Gravity's a beast," to no one in particular. Henry relaxed as the pain eased, but at the top, Jackson set the final box down with slow precision. He exhaled once, steady and slow, then turned to descend again. Linda now stood at the bottom of the stairs. She didn't speak, but she didn't move either. Mark passed her. "Hope you're enjoying the show," he said with a grin. She didn't reply. Her eyes hadn't left Jackson. Mark passed her, and his eyes had left Jackson. Back on the floor, Mark pointed at the corner Jackson had mopped earlier. "Still filthy," he barked. Jackson knelt, ran a finger across the tile. It was clean, anyone could see that. Mark didn't care. "Do it again, louder now, loud enough for everyone to hear." Jackson didn't argue. He dipped the mop and started over. Caleb winced. Even he knew it was wrong. Linda walked past Mark, silent, deliberate. She didn't look at him, but her silence was thunderous. Mark chuckled. "He'll quit by tomorrow," he said, then glanced at Linda. "Right?" She didn't reply. Her eyes were still on Jackson. Still calm, but not the same calm. Jackson kept mopping, slow, even strokes, like nothing had happened. Mark leaned against the wall, arms folded, watching. "Most guys would have snapped by now," Caleb whispered. It was the swing movements which lay in definite iron. Linda didn't respond. Her jaw was locked tight. Jackson finished the corner, rinsed them up, returned it to the bucket. No sigh, no frustration, not even a glance toward Mark. That made it worse. Mark stepped forward, blocked his path. Just for a beat. Jackson paused, then stepped around him, quietly, deliberately. No words, no challenge. Mark watched him go. The smirk on his face dimmed just a little. Linda's eyes followed Jackson. This time, she wasn't just curious. She was waiting. For what? She wasn't sure. But the room felt still. Not peaceful. Just waiting. Jackson sat again on the same crate, same bottle of water, same stillness in his face, like he had all the time in the world. Mark paced near the tool rack, his boots heavier now, his voice quieter. Caleb leaned toward Linda. Why isn't he mad? She didn't answer. Jackson pulled out his notebook, wrote something, folded it shut. Mark stared from across the room, jaw tight. Then he walked toward Jackson, slow, measured. He stopped in front of him. "What are you writing?" Jackson didn't look up, just keeping track. Mark tried to smile. Of what? No answer. The silence hit harder than any insult. The buzzer rang. End of shift. Jackson stood, stretched slowly, picked up his notebook. Mark called out, voice loud enough for all to hear. "Hey, Grandpa, got a minute?" Jackson turned, didn't speak, just waited. Mark approached, wide grin but flat eyes. "You like taking notes, huh?" He pointed at the book. "Write this down. Nobody cares what you think." Jackson didn't flinch, took one step forward. "Let's talk," he said. His voice low, calm, firm. Mark blinked, just once. Linda looked up. Caleb stopped walking. Even the forklift paused. Jackson gestured toward the office. 10 minutes. That's all I need." Mark hesitated, then followed, but not with the same swagger. Behind closed doors, Mark crossed his arms. Jackson didn't sit. He opened the notebook, tore out a page, and placed it on the desk. Mark glanced down. Shift schedules. His name circled 3 times. Jackson spoke, calm as ever. "You've been blocking overtime approvals." Mark laughed once, forced. Jackson slid a badge across the table. It read, "Area Supervisor, Jackson Rivers." Mark froze. Jackson didn't raise his voice. "I'm here to observe operations, not play games." Mark tried to speak, couldn't. Jackson lifted his notebook, looked Mark in the eye. "You can keep pretending, or you can fix what's broken." Mark swallowed hard. No comeback. Jackson pocketed the badge. "We start clean tomorrow. Everyone gets treated fairly, including you." Mark didn't respond, didn't move. Jackson waited 1 second, then turned and walked out. The hallway felt different, lighter, quieter. Lyndon watched him pass. Her eyes weren't skeptical anymore. They were sure. Caleb leaned against the wall, silent, but he stepped aside. In the break room, someone whispered, "Did something just change?" No answer, but they all felt it. Mark sat alone in the office, lights still on, but it felt cold. He stared at the paper Jackson left. Names, notes, everything. He crumpled it, tossed it aside. He didn't miss the way footsteps quieted near the door. No more greetings. Next morning, Mark showed up early, earlier than usual. He didn't speak to Jackson, didn't look at him. His eyes scanned the room, landed on someone new. Thin frame, nervous hands, carrying boxes carefully. A slow smile crept across Mark's face. "If Jackson's off limits," he muttered, "someone else will do just fine." The new hire's name was Eli. Mid-20s, polite, soft-spoken, clean boots. Holding his clipboard like it might shatter. Mark approached, voice friendly but not real. "First day. Ha ha ha." Eli nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." Mark chuckled. "Don't call me that, unless you screw something up." He pointed at a stack of crates. "Move those to aisle 6, alone." Then walked off. Eli hesitated, looked around. Nobody moved to help. From the far shelf, Jackson saw everything. Said nothing. Yeah. Eli lifted the first crate. Arms trembling. Not built for this. Not yet. Mark leaned on the railing above, hands in pockets, watching, not blinking. "You drop it, you clean it," he called, half joking, half not. Eli nodded, didn't answer, kept moving. Linda walked by with a clipboard, slowed down for just a second, saw the crate, saw Mark, then met Jackson's eyes. A silent message passed between them. Jackson stepped closer to the aisle, not interfering, just there. Mark noticed, smirked. "Looks like I've got an audience again," he said. Then louder, "Don't slow down, Eli. You're not here to be babysat." He had dropped a degree. Eli dragged the second crate down the aisle, breath shallow, back straining. Mark called again. "Pick up the pace. This isn't yoga class." The room held its breath. And Jackson, Jackson took one slow, deliberate step forward. A few workers glanced toward the noise, then looked away, almost like muscle memory. Caleb shook his head and muttered beneath his breath, "This again?" Linda paused mid-walk, clipboard in hand, her fingers tapping in an uneven rhythm. Across the room, Jackson leaned on a supply cart, not watching Eli but watching everyone else. Their reactions, their silence, the small shifts in posture that spoke volumes. Eli stumbled slightly under the weight of the crate but caught himself. He didn't speak. His eyes stayed down. Mark clapped once, mock applause echoing through the warehouse. That's the spirit. But this time, the silence that followed didn't feel like fear. It felt like discomfort, thick and rising. Something was changing in the air, and Mark hadn't caught on yet. Eli reached for the third crate. His hand slipped. The box fell with a soft, muted thud. Everyone turned. Mark was the first to speak. "You just broke inventory." Eli knelt quickly. "No, sir, nothing's damaged." Mark stepped closer, voice suddenly sharp. "You don't get to decide that." Jackson took a long breath. He didn't move, not yet, but his gaze locked onto Mark, cool, unwavering. Linda set her clipboard down with a controlled firmness that said she'd had enough. Caleb muttered again, this time a little louder. "This is getting old." Eli stood, hands trembling slightly, his eyes fixed on the floor. Mark sneered, "Maybe you're not cut out for this place." And something shifted. The silence that followed wasn't about obeying anymore. It was resistance. It was realization. Mark leaned too close. "Drop something again and you'll be mopping the parking lot." Eli nodded, still silent. Jackson took one step forward, then stopped. Linda crossed her arms. She didn't move either, but she didn't look away. Mark turned toward the rest of the crew. "Nobody's got anything to say?" Silence, but not the kind Mark was used to. Caleb glanced at Jackson, just for a second, then he picked up his broom. Mark saw it. His smirk faltered, just a little. He stepped back from Eli. "Get back to work." Eli exhaled quiet, but not invisible. Then he lifted the final crate, his movement slower now, but steady. Jackson moved into the center aisle, not blocking, not commanding. Just visible, present. Mark pretended not to notice, but his shoulders tightened. Linda checked her watch, glanced at Mark, then at Eli. Caleb swept near the loading zone but moved slower, more deliberate, listening more than working. One by one, others began watching. Not openly, just enough, but enough that Mark noticed. He didn't know how to stop it. Jackson folded his arms, still watching. The work continued, but it carried weight now, and Mark could feel it pressing against his ribs. He walked toward the back wall. No one followed. Every step felt watched. He grabbed a clipboard, stared at it, blank. Just something to hold. Jackson didn't move. Linda quietly organized a shelf nearby, said nothing. Caleb wiped down the tool rack, glancing back and forth between Jackson and Mark. Mark turned. "Busy day, huh?" Nobody replied. He gave a half-hearted laugh, then looked at the clock. Still an hour to go. Jackson leaned on a post. No clipboard, no notebook. Just standing there, watching. And somehow it was enough to shift the entire room. Mark leaned on the counter, palms flat. He scanned the warehouse. No fear in their eyes now, just stillness and something colder. Distance. Jackson walked past him. Didn't stop. Didn't speak. Mark cleared his throat. Loud, useless. Nobody turned. Eli organized tape rolls, each movement deliberate, no wasted effort. Linda restocked gloves beside Caleb, their conversation too low for Mark to catch. He stepped closer. "Need me to explain it slower?" he smirked. Lyndon didn't flinch. "No, we've got it." Eli didn't even glance up, just followed her lead, steady, focused. Mark waited for a reaction. There wasn't one. Behind him, Jackson moved a crate with ease, like he'd done it his whole life. Mark turned, looking for something he could still control. Found nothing. The floor didn't feel like his anymore. Mark picked up a broom, dragged it across the concrete. Not sweeping, just moving, pacing. Stopped near the racks, spoke louder. "Let's keep it tight, people. Standards matter." No one looked up. No nods, no smiles. Just motion. Linda adjusted a label. Caleb helped Ely wrap a pallet quick, clean. Mark walked by, slower now. Used to be more hustle around here. Still nothing. Jackson stood near the rear exit, clipboard in hand. Silent. Steady. Mark faced him. "You think this is better?" Jackson didn't answer. Not with words, just a glance at the room, moving smoothly, without shouting, without fear. And that silence hit harder than any accusation. Mark stepped outside for air. The door clicked behind him. No one followed. He lit a cigarette. Didn't smoke it, just held it, fingers trembling slightly. Through the dusty window, he saw it to Eli, laughing at something Linda said, Caleb smiling faintly. Mark turned away, took a long breath, didn't exhale. Inside, Jackson stepped into view, didn't open the door, just stood. And for the first time, Mark wondered, maybe the place worked better without him. He leaned against the brick wall, the cigarette burned low. He didn't touch it. His phone buzzed. He didn't check it. From inside, the door opened, just slightly. Not for Mark, just to pass a box through. He didn't move, didn't try to grab it. The breeze curled through the lot. He stared at the gravel where he used to stand proud. Now it felt like foreign ground. Not because it changed, but because he hadn't. And somewhere deep inside, he knew it. The door creaked behind him. Soft steps followed. He didn't turn. A paper cup appeared at his side. Coffee. Still warm. Linda held it out. Didn't speak right away. Just waited. Mark took it, didn't look up, just nodded. Thanks. She didn't walk away. Didn't scold him, didn't pity him. Just stood beside him. In silence, two people, no roles, no armor. After a long pause, she said softly, "It's different now." Mark didn't argue. Took a sip. The bitterness burned, but he drank it anyway. She added, "Doesn't mean there's no place for you." Then she left him there, with the wind, the silence, and the smallest reason to stay. Mark stood at the door, hand on the frame, coffee still warm. Inside, the warehouse moved like a living thing, voices low, movements smooth. He stepped in. Didn't announce himself. Didn't command. Jackson glanced up, nodded once. Mark nodded back. Walked past the racks. Saw things he'd ignored for years. Labels, systems, rhythm. Eli moved past with a dolly. No fear. Just focus. Linda handed Caleb a list, organized, clean. It worked. Mark stayed near the edge. Didn't speak. Didn't interrupt. He didn't feel small. Just unfamiliar. Like a beginner. And for now, that felt honest. He picked up an empty box, carried it where it needed to go. No one clapped. No one commented. But someone noticed. Eli passed him a label roll. No words, just a small nod. Mark took it, used it carefully. Linda glanced over, said nothing, but didn't look away. Caleb slid a crate close, left space beside it. Mark filled the gap. No one asked, no hesitation. It wasn't much, but it was real. Jackson stood by the far wall. He didn't interfere, just watched the rhythm settle. And in that quiet motion, in that shared effort, Mark found something he hadn't felt in years. Usefulness. He taped the last box shut. Smooth. No one said, "Good job." No one needed to. Mark looked around. Really looked. And for the first time, he didn't see employees or rookies. He saw a team. Moving with rhythm, not fear. Coordinated, not commanded. He caught the passing flicker of Linda walking by. She didn't pause, but her voice was different. Softer, even respectful. "Next rack's ready," she said. Mark nodded. No questions, no second guessing, just move. Caleb brought over a new stack, placing it near Mark. Their hands almost met in the handoff, and Caleb didn't flinch or pull away. Jackson scribbled something briefly on his clipboard. No speech, no spotlight, just observation. Quiet leadership. He set the laptop down. Mark didn't feel above anyone anymore. He didn't want to. He was in it now. Not above the floor, not outside the flow. He was finally present, and for the first time in what felt like decades. That was enough. He wiped his hands on a rag, then folded it neatly and set it down. He checked the stack one last time, not out of fear, but care. He wasn't being watched. He wasn't being judged. He was simply there. Jackson crossed the floor, stopping beside him. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Presence was enough. Then the warehouse door opened with a quiet groan. A new figure entered. Older. Slower. Dressed plainly. He didn't rush, didn't perform. But every step carried weight. Everyone noticed, not loudly, but fully. Eli leaned toward Linda. "Who's that?" She didn't answer right away. Mark turned too, gaze narrowing. There was something familiar about the man's stance, his quiet authority. He didn't wear a badge, didn't need one. Jackson smiled faintly. "This one's not here to pack boxes," he said softly. Mark understood instantly. The game was shifting again. The man moved slowly through the warehouse, light steps, but confident. He nodded to no one in particular, yet everyone stood just a bit straighter. Lyndon straightened her notes. Caleb stopped moving, hands at his sides. Eli stood frozen, half a strip of tape still hanging from his roll. Mark watched closely, his brows drawn tight, trying to place a face half remembered from a story or a legacy. The man walked past the racks, glanced once at the workflow, and kept going. Jackson met him halfway. No handshake, just a shared look, quiet and respectful. Mark stepped forward, not aggressively, just curious. "Can I help you?" he asked. The man paused, studied Mark a moment too long, then replied in a voice that was too calm to ignore. "No, but I've been watching you." Mark froze. That tone, measured, reflective, cut deeper than any reprimand. He stepped back, just half a pace. The man's eyes didn't follow. They stayed still. Solid. Jackson stood by, silent but steady. "No need to explain," the man said gently. "I've walked this floor before, long before you did." "Hmm?" Mark looked harder, noticed the lines on his face, the hands, calloused, strong, hands that had known work before paperwork. For the past 10 years, he had been with Juliana Homeland, the paper. Then the man said it. Walter Stone, founder, chairman. No badge, no announcement, but the truth hit like thunder. Mark swallowed. The room felt smaller now, not colder, just heavier. Linda watched from a distance. She didn't smile, just nodded once. Caleb bowed his head slightly, not out of habit, out of recognition. Walter turned to Mark again. "I came to see if the culture held." He looked toward Jackson. "You've done your part, now I'll do mine." Just like that, the curtain lifted, and the top revealed itself. Walter faced the team not to grandstand but to connect. "I started here, same as all of you," he said, "with a broom, with back pain, with long hours and few thanks." No one moved. "I lost my way once," Walter continued, voice low but firm. "I thought respect came from control. It doesn't." He looked at Mark. Not with judgment, with memory. "See what I used to be? Not weak, just lost." Mark lowered his gaze. His hand stayed still. Words didn't come. Walter rested a hand on Jackson's shoulder. "You reminded this place who we are." He looked to Linda, to Caleb. "All of you did." Silence again, but this time it was full, not feared, just honest. Walter gave a single nod, then walked the aisle again. Slow, familiar. Jackson followed. No clipboard, no badge, just walking together. Mark stood still by the rack. He didn't run. He didn't leave. He just watched. Then he turned, not as a manager, not as a threat. Just a man. Linda handed him a label roll. This time he took it without hesitation. Caleb gave him a box. No words, just trust. Eli lifted the dolly. Mark helped him balance it. No orders exchanged. The warehouse returned to motion. Not powered by fear, but by rhythm. Jackson glanced back once, met Mark's eyes. A single nod was exchanged, and that was enough. The floor kept moving, but this time with everyone in.